Please join us in welcoming Suzanne to the stage.
She knows what I think about, and what I think about. One love, two mouths, one love, one house. No shirt, no blouse, just us.
Am I on? Good. I emailed Amanda yesterday. We were going back and forth a bit, and I said, I know that your company's culture is about being your best self, but can you be just a little less your best self so that I might shine? Clearly that didn't work. So I came to this business of figuring out how to get messages heard really as a young child. And I think it's because I was one of a very large family of siblings and cousins. We actually lived next door. We had a lot of kids, and then we lived next door to our cousins, and they had a lot of kids, and I was the youngest. And I think I spent my whole childhood trying to figure out how to actually get heard, whether it was at a dinner table or in the backyard or at the holidays where there were, endless numbers of people there. And I think the bubble over my head was always, I don't understand why the things that I have to say that I think matter have to compete in a family who are talking about like the White Sox obsessively. So later, 10,000 hours later, have you all read Malcolm Gladwell's book, 10,000 Hours? For those who don't, I'll just quickly tell you the premise, which is that if you want to become an expert, a true expert in something, you have to have spent 10,000 hours simply focusing on that one thing, whether you're an athlete or an artist, a musician. And so every year I actually calculate the number of hours because I literally have done nothing else for almost 24 years than this one small thing, which is I think obsessively about how you can get ideas that matter to be heard, which is becoming increasingly difficult, as we know, in today's marketplace where the barriers to entry are really low, so everybody can get their ideas heard. So that's what I do, and I'm going to share with you today just the main, if I have where's the pointer? The big idea that our company arrived at early on, but it took us a lot of pattern recognition, and I'm going to share that with you today. So this is the idea. If you actually feel that what you have to say matters, then the question is always, well, what do I have to do in order to get people to pay attention to what it is I have to say? And I'm going to tell you that it has nothing to do with fancy graphics or interesting video or anything of that sort. It has to do with this one thing I'm going to talk about today, which is your point of view. And I really came across this about 2 years ago. I was in a meeting that was a group of women who were brought together to talk about how we can solve the problem of needing more women in the tech industry in Chicago. Amanda and I were both very involved in the whole Tech Week scandal, where there was that invitation that wasn't so female-friendly, and there were lots of meetings going on. And I actually felt really uncomfortable attending these meetings, in part because it took me a long time to actually even recognize myself as a woman in business. And I mean that sincerely. There were lots and lots of times in the early days of my company where people would come and say, well, why don't you go approach those investors because they fund women and minority-owned businesses? And I would say, well, why would they be interested in us? It just didn't occur to me to frame myself that way. But when these kind of issues come up in our community, you lean in, to use the phrase, and I wanted to be at the table. So we're all sitting, it's 20 people at a table, and the conversation kept going around in kind of cul-de-sacs. And we all know what that feels like to be in a meeting where you just can't get traction. So there was the whole, oh, it's about work-life balance cul-de-sac. And then there was the tech companies are fraternities cul-de-sac, right? And at some point, the meeting fundamentally shifted. And I sat back and I watched that all of a sudden the cul-de-sacs disappeared. And the 20 people around the table were actually having a real conversation, really talking to each other, really engaging. And it was at that moment that it occurred to me that this tool that we've come up with, that we work with brands and companies to talk about their large-scale products, ideas, and services, actually is true for individuals as well. So what I'm going to talk about today actually, I think, can work at your lunch table today. Just give it a try. Try it at your dinner table tonight. And I think especially for young girls, teaching them the difference between having a point of view and an opinion really matters. So this is the problem we're trying to solve, right? So many of us go around our lives thinking to ourselves, I'm doing something so interesting, so important. What I'm working on really should be in front of more people, but I just can't figure out how to get people to pay attention so that it matters more. So this is what a point of view is. And I'm, by the way, using point of view really as a term of art. We call it a POV when we do the acronym. But when I refer to it, this isn't just a generic point of view. This is actually a methodology and a tool that I want you to try to take in and learn today. So point of view is this. It's your stance. I mean, we all know when we see people walk, for anybody who watches Scandal, right? You watch Olivia Pope and she's like, that's her stance. You watch people enter a room or get onto a stage. It's your stance in the world, and that matters. It's also the position you tend to take. And ideally, you take it often enough so that even if, for example, you were on a panel and there were no name tags in front of you and no one knew what company you were representing, that the minute you started to speak, they would say, oh, that must be Suzanne from Mind and Matter Studio because she always talks about having a point of view. Right? So it's how you choose to present yourself. It's like a lens clip through which you see the world. And once you have it on, it's actually really hard to take it off. So for example, one point of view I hold is that a social impact mission, a company that actually frontally has a purpose, sees that as a competitive advantage in the marketplace. It's not a nice to have, it's not a charitable give back. It is a business strategy. It's a point of view, okay? So this is what I mean, and I want to show you today how you actually land on this and how you articulate it. And here's the key. Your point of view needs to be pointy. And I learned this because when I started in radio, I was thrown onto a live business talk radio show, and I was horrible, like so horrible that the callers were hanging up on us. And the engineer who we were taping out at WBZ, and the engineer was like, you're so bad. Who put you on this show? And I realized it was because, well, first of all, being on the radio is way harder than it looks. And you can't just go on and just start talking and think that people are going to like what you have to say. But what I realized was I just kept throwing out opinion after opinion. Right? People don't engage with opinions. In fact, it often puts up a wall. People engage with a point of view. And they engage with the point of view that's pointy because it needs to be sharp enough that they can either agree or disagree. They can opt in, they can opt out. They can actually become a little uncomfortable, or they can wildly nod their heads. That's what it means for a point of view to be pointy. And when you start doing it often enough, truly, it just becomes a habit. I'm much better on the radio now, but I have to say that thank God we went to podcasts, which, by the way, 2 years ago, I felt like that was a punishment, right? They took us off of live radio and they put us in a podcast. And I was like, what the hell is a podcast? Truly. Well, today, that's much better, not only because podcasts are becoming a fast-growing media distribution for talk radio, but also because we can edit. And so I can swear, they edit it out. I can express an opinion, they edit it out. A caller gets mad, we edit it out. So these are a couple of examples of points of view, and I actually hesitated to show you these first or after, but I wanted to show them to you just so that you don't sit there thinking, well, what does she mean? What does she mean? What does she mean? So I'm going to talk to you about these briefly, and then I want to unpack them with you, okay? So Jennifer Brandel, does anyone listen to Curious City on NPR or WBEZ? It's a fantastic show. Amanda, of course you do. So Curious City is a great show because it actually asks the listeners, before the show starts, things they are curious about relative to Chicago. And then the show answers those questions on the air. So it's really audience driven. And so this is Jennifer Brandel's point of view about how you engage people and how you engage audiences. And her mindset that she's referring to is they need to drive it, right? Just like in a room like today, I need to speak to what I think are the bubbles over your head. What are the things that are keeping you up at night? What are the things you're curious about? And then I'll do a much better job. And wherever she goes, you'll hear this point of view. Elon Musk, right, the Tesla founder. Even though we know him for his cars, what he's actually better known for is this point of view. It's the point of view that led him to unleash the IP, which was an unbelievable thing to do in a competitive market. But he's actually aiming at something bigger, which is he thinks that all of us can unleash our potential to do amazing and great things. And whenever he speaks, you won't hear him talk about the cars first. You will always hear him speak through this point of view. And finally, one of my favorites. So I actually had to edit this out because they use other language that I find a little bit insulting. Some of it refers to Hooters. I'm not even joking. But let's just go with the cleaned up version that I put out there today. What Harley-Davidson believes is that all of us are feeling this increasing need for personal freedom, and that all around us our personal freedoms are being collapsed, and therefore we want to get out on the open road. And again, whenever you hear a Harley-Davidson ad, when you hear their CEO speak, this is their point of view. It's about personal freedom. These are powerful, big, headline, TED Talk, media, interesting, quality ideas, and this is how I really want you to speak. And I want you to speak this way because I know it works. And I know that if you just test it and you practice it, it actually will become not only a way of life for you, but at your businesses and at your companies, meetings should feel this way. Conversation should be this quality of engagement. So now let's talk about how you get here. So this is a formula. I think it works. We've done it lots and lots of times, not quite 10,000, but close. And this is how you arrive at your point of view. So it's made up of the first three things, but actually the last is the most important, and I'll get to that in a minute. So it starts with, what are your assumptions? Think about your business. Think about a message that you want to get out. Think about if you're constantly trying to convince your employees of something. Think about a marketing message you might want to be portraying in the media. Think about what you want to say as a leader. You always start with a set of assumptions. And the interesting thing about these assumptions is they're just if-then. I assume that if this, then that. And we all have those assumptions, so you can just easily start there. They actually don't need to be backed up. That's why it's an assumption, okay? So I'm assuming, for example, that if your company actually has an authentic mission, then you will have better talent acquisition, you will have better traction in the marketplace. These are assumptions I have about communicating in the world. And then you get to your beliefs. So the beliefs are the really deep down, dig deep kind of statements that you know are with you wherever you go, but you don't often say them. And it's actually okay not to say them. That's why they're your beliefs. You don't have to back them up, you don't have to articulate them, but you have to hold them close. And you have to be really, really confident in your own sense of self when you have a belief about something. And then it is true that you have to have a killer data point. You have to back it up, right? At some point, your if-then, your beliefs, what you know has to have data. And so I know, for example, what competitive advantage means when I'm talking about having a mission or a social impact. I know the books that have been written. I know the articles that have been put out in front of you with lots and lots of data points that get right to the relationship between having a mission and your company's overarching financial success. I know those data points, and you need them. But then finally you get to this last piece, and the last piece is really the kicker. So the last piece is what you reject. And all of us sit around tables, and we listen to our colleagues. We listen to other people speaking, and at some point, you have to say to yourself, I don't buy that. It's not what I believe. It's not what I stand for. I reject that. And powerful movements come from this. When you actually hear something really powerful, behind it is not only what they stand for, but what they outwardly reject. And too often you leave this part out. So you're trying constantly to make other people embrace your ideas. But I'm telling you 100%, I have data that'll back it up. If you're clear about what you reject, what you don't believe, you will actually get people to engage with your ideas more. And we have a case in point. The pointiest point of view that's out there right now. You can agree, can disagree, but it's right in front of us every day, right? So who has the pointiest point of view? Right? And I want you to actually take this seriously, because I'm not making a political point. I'm purely talking about getting an idea to have traction in the marketplace, right? This is a point of view. And the reason you know it's a point of view is it's pointy. It makes people angry. It makes them uncomfortable. And yet it also gets the right people to opt in and gets other people to opt out. I'm telling you, this is why he's winning. This is why he's winning, because he has a point of view, right? And you can back up into it. He's making a whole set of assumptions. He has deep beliefs. He's putting out data, whether you believe that data is accurate or not, he's putting out data. And again, I'm truly not trying to be political. I just want you to think about it. And for everybody, are you planning on watching tonight? Okay. I want you after today to go and listen carefully. He will be putting out a point of view tonight, again and again and again and again. And as much as we want Hillary to actually have a point of view as well, hers is softer. So the point of view that she's put out, as much as we can try to make sense of it, is stronger together. And these aren't slogans. By the time you arrive at a marketing slogan, you needed to have a point of view behind it. Stronger together, I actually don't know what that means. I don't know enough about what you stand for and what you reject. It's not pointy enough. This, I get it. I may not like it. I may disagree, but I get it. And that's what having a pointy point of view is all about, right? So watch tonight and watch it unfold, right? And I also want you to see something afterwards. When you listen to the commentators afterwards, and this is regardless of what network you're watching, you will hear the commentators speak to point of view. You'll hear it, because that's what wins the day. That's what will make the headlines tomorrow. And if you listen for it, I promise that you will hear it. So this is the point of view that shifted things in that meeting that I was referring to earlier. At some point in the room, the conversation went from those cul-de-sacs to someone saying out loud and sharing this point of view. She said, you know, we're having all these conversations as if everything that we're talking about here today would affect all women in tech, all women in our companies, that if we just did this, then women would. But she posited a point of view, which is, well, what if women aren't a vertical? I don't know that women are a vertical. I don't believe that women are a vertical. You can keep saying it, and it'll get pointier and pointier each time. And when she said it, the conversation shifted, because now we're in a real conversation. Not opinions about work-life balance, not opinions about whether or not the culture of tech companies is a fraternity or not, but actually whether or not we believe this. Do we agree? Do we disagree? Do we opt in? Do we opt out? So let's just unpack this, right? She was making a set of assumptions, which is that the way even we in the room were talking about women was as if they were a single category. That was the assumption she was making, right? That we're actually viewing women as a vertical. And then she went to her belief system. And again, these aren't things that get said point by point. I'm just unpacking it because I know enough to listen for this, that I know what's behind it. So her belief is we actually need to come up with customized solutions because women are different. They have different needs. Not all women are mothers. Not all women have the same schedules at home. Not all women are married. We need to come up with more customized solutions, right? That's a belief. It's a belief. She can't quite back it up. I don't know that she has facts, but it didn't matter. And then she put out a couple of really impressive data points. And this is how you speak once you have a point of view. You literally go through this kind of a thought process. Am I giving people an assumption that they can respond to? Am I putting my own beliefs? Am I digging really deep and making sure people know that what I believe in? And then do I actually have any kind of data to back it up? And her point was, we actually know that women come into the tech industry through hundreds of different career paths. It's never just STEM, so we can talk about STEM and the pipeline that's needed, but that's not the way that all women come in to work, not in tech. We also know that women come in with lots of different backgrounds from an education point of view. She had the data to back that up. And finally, and this is interesting because Amanda and I wrote an article or an op-ed maybe 2 years ago that was called The 5 Things We Are Doing to Solve the Women in Tech Problem in Chicago. And one of the things we rejected in that article was that discussions about how to make culture better for women could not take place in rooms full of women. That you needed to have men and women sitting in the same room, having the same conversation. And we went further than that, and we said we reject the idea of panels that are single sex. All women, all men, never do it. We don't believe in it, we won't sit on them. It doesn't work. That's what we rejected, okay? And in this room, they were saying the same thing. If we're the 20 of us sitting around having this conversation, it means that we believe that women are a vertical, and we reject that. Now you have a real conversation. And so what I want to say to you about this whole idea of point of view is that it is what actually ultimately gets people on your side. And the good thing about this is if people opt out, you want that. That's better. Because at the end of the day, it's better to actually have a tribe of people who are all rowing in the same direction. And if people opt out, A, let them, and B, have that conversation then. What a wonderful, welcoming, interesting conversation to have if someone fundamentally rejects your point of view, right? You will absolutely get people's buy-in at the end of that day if you're pointy and if you're sharp. So I want to say one more thing about how you convey this. And this was a whole other talk, but I'm going to give just a piece of it now. Someone said to me recently in a room, well, I have a point of view. It's really pointy. I say it all the time, but then people always really get angry. People really always push back on me, and then they make me feel badly that I presented my point of view. And even as she was talking, I knew what the problem was, which was voice, right? So 2 things have occurred that I think need to be changed. One is Upspeak. Do you know what I'm referring to when I refer to Upspeak? When people talk like this in meetings, as if everything they say is a question. we laugh. This is how I'm laughing in response to that. It's truly one of the things that I spend the most amount of time on when I mentor, especially teams of women, when I raise my daughters. We need to eliminate the upspeak. And in part because it is impossible to have a point of view if you ask it and state it like a question. It's impossible to be pointy if when you land your statements, they sound like a question. And this isn't just women. I've now heard men do it, and actually the most troubling thing that I came across was I was teaching or lecturing at Kellogg in a class that had almost all international students for some reason. There were like 80% had come from other countries and 20% were from the States. So many of the people in the room had learned English as a second language. And I'm telling you, as they introduced themselves, person after person used Upspeak. Well, where are they hearing that, right? They're hearing it in our culture. They're hearing it on television. They're hearing it when they turn on podcasts. They are hearing the Upspeak. And we have to eliminate it because you can't be pointy with Upspeak. And the second thing that's happened, which I honestly believe is part of the Hillary Clinton issue, and we have no idea how it'll play out tonight, is that in response to trying to actually be pointy, too many women feel that they have to actually put on this kind of armor and ground themselves and protect themselves in what they're about to say so that they don't feel vulnerable to attack. And that isn't what good communication is about, and it's not what I mean about being pointy. Being pointy means you expose yourself. You put yourself out there in the world. You become vulnerable with confidence. You open yourself up to having people say, I disagree. I don't buy that. I opt out. You're making me uncomfortable. All of those things, whether they're spoken or unspoken, actually mean that you're doing a good job. And too often when we sit at meetings and you've got the big long table and the person in power takes the position at the head of the table, there's a dynamic that goes on that leads people to either question themselves in the face of strong opinion or it leads them to kind of go on lockdown. And I'm telling you that the point of view will free you from that. Because the thing that you want the point of view to do is to engage. You want it to be a real conversation. And this is true in marketing as well. Because we all know that real marketing, effective messaging in the world is a conversation with your stakeholders. That's what it is. It's not a one-way communication of what you think is right or what they want to hear. It's an actual conversation, and that's what makes it meaningful, right? So I'll just leave you with this, and then I know we're going to take some questions as well. Searching for your voice. And I put this as a quote aimed at women simply because of the theme of the day and the conference, but I think this is true of men as well. I think finding our voice is our life's pursuit. It's the thing that if we're raising the next generation, if you're mentoring millennials, if you're bringing people into your company in a way where you want them to succeed, not only in the skills and tasks, but actually at becoming leaders, at making a difference, at having something to say that actually adds to the conversation of the company, then you need to train people to have a voice. And too often this goes completely just ignored in the face of all of the professional development that we do. I don't know that I've ever been to a good, effective professional development session that teaches people voice. But you have to have it. And if you haven't found your own, then the point of view is the way in. It's a path in to having a voice. So I encourage you to listen tonight, to read articles and catch it right there, and you'll land on it. You'll go, that's a point of view. And I want you to start going into conversations, whether it's one-on-one with friends out to dinner, or whether it's in your next meeting, posit a point of view. Make it pointy. Think of it like the battering ram that's headed into the marketplace. It's got to be sharp, right? I actually tested this out. Are you Game of Thrones people? If you watch, their battering rams that they use don't go like this. They actually go like this. And that's when you know you're going to open the door. So I'll close with that thought. I know we're taking some questions, and there are mics out there. Is that right? Yes, organizers? Questions? Yeah.
I still don't get the distinction between opinion and point of view. Could you give me another example?
Sure. So an opinion is something where you are simply responding to a current event, okay? So your opinion could potentially be, I think America is a really strong country. I think we're doing great. That's an opinion, okay? You could believe, I actually think that our economy is strong. That's an opinion. You're weighing in on something, but you're not actually positing a point of view. It's less sharp. It's more responsive. A point of view, make America great again, has all sorts of layers to it. Does that help?
Yes, it sure does.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes, back there.
Is your point of view the mission, your mission from a business owner?
I love that question. I feel like I planted that. No, it is not, okay? A mission is aspirational. A mission typically tries to capture, we do this so that that occurs. And if it's a good mission statement, it will sound like this. So what, so that, so then. We do this so that this occurs, so that then the world looks like this. So what, so that, so then. That's a good mission statement, but it is not a point of view. It simply says what you are going to do as a company in order to actually achieve a certain end result, create a certain kind of world, and ideally it'll capture a little bit about your how, right? So a mission is really aimed much more at a what, a how, and a why. That's a mission statement, and it's important to have it. But a point of view is edgier. A point of view actually suggests to people that every time they encounter someone from your company, they are going to see the world through this lens. So for example, if our company, this was not a mission, this was our point of view, was that when social impact intentions and their markets align, both are amplified. Meaning, if you do in fact pursue a social good and you find a market for that social good, both your traction in that marketplace and your company's revenue will accelerate. That's a point of view, that's not a mission, right? That's what we believe, that's what we assume, it's what we know. And what we reject is the idea that somehow you have siloed corporate social responsibility and your main company, your corporate philanthropy and your main company. We reject that. So do you hear the difference between that, between mission and point of view? And I suggest that companies have both. And I want to be clear that a point of view is actually internal, right? A point of view doesn't need to be put up and out in front of your building or inside your advertising or messaging. Point of view is deeply personal. And so it's an inside-out process, okay? Whereas mission typically does get put up on the website, passed around. External people can see it. Yes?
No, I was just going to say, so if your point of view is something that's...
Can people back here hear? I think we may need to get you a mic. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm just trying to...
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's left. So if your point of view is something that is representative of your company, how does it become individual then to the people who are working for you? Because isn't your point of view something that you believe, it's what you believe personally? Am I
it's-
making sense?
Yes. I've said two things today, and I want to both put them up on a table and look at them side by side, and then also look at them together. I've said that I believe that you as an individual will become a stronger leader when you have a point of view. That's for you. That's your everyday practice in the world, is to go into settings, go into meetings, go into conversations with a point of view. At the company level, and when we do this work with companies, lots and lots of people are involved. It's usually never just the C-suite or a small group of people sitting around and then saying, hey, this is our point of view. However, once you do it, it should be fairly evergreen, so you're always going to have new people coming into the company who have not been part of that process. And what I believe, in the same way when Amanda talked about the job descriptions being advertising for your company, when you speak to prospective employees, you have to share your point of view. You have to. And then the right talent will opt in, and it will serve as a mechanism for sifting people out. Yes.
This is great. This is very interesting. Thank you. I'm trying to distinguish between, or how one feeds the other, point of view and branding, especially personal branding.
Yep.
I'm a solopreneur, so that might be a little bit easier, although some people have their own personal point of view and run a company, but have a lot of personal points of view in their company. How does that feed each other?
So if you're a solo entrepreneur, then your point of view probably does express itself quite seamlessly in your branding. So for you, that is easier. But I will say the branding is just simply your expression of your point of view, right? The branding is, to me, that is secondary. People think that they've branded a company because they have a logo and they have a website and they have a look and feel and a tagline. That's the easy stuff. Identity work, figuring out who you are, what you stand for, why you matter, who you want as your customers, who you don't want as your customers, what it is that actually drives the culture of the company, that is identity work. Point of view lives there. Branding is the expression of that in the world. And again, the same is true for all of us. Whenever we think about our personal brand, right, who you are, what you believe in, how you actually, your stance in the world, you make lots of choices off of that identity every single day, from how you speak, to what you wear, to how you write, to what you put on social media. That is the expression of that identity. Okay. I think maybe one more. Yeah, I know we're trying to get back on time. Yeah, one more? No? Okay. So look, I do hope that we all engage tonight. I think that that's the most important thing. And it's not about our politics. It's about people being part of a conversation. And I hope you'll listen a little bit differently. And I hope at the next meeting that you go to, you'll try it out. And the worst thing that will happen is that you're too pointy, you're too sharp. You'll make some people angry, but as a coach once said to me, I'd rather you start by going all the way out, because it's always easier to rein you in, than to start softly tapping through and try to push ahead to be pointier. So thank you so much.
It's not what you say is way to complicate.